Hi, welcome to Silent Generation. I'm Joseph,
I'm Nathan.
and today we're joined by James of Gent Z.
Thank you for having me. Great to be here.
It's good to have you on, James. I think we'll just start off with some questions and stuff. I think my first kind of order of business is, are you Gent Z, or is Gent Z an organization, or is it the whole brand?
I was thinking about this because I knew you were going to ask me about it. I suppose I am Gent Z, but Gent Z is also just like an online name that I came up for the channel. Maybe in future there will be other Gent Zs, but for now it's just me. I, use the name James, but I don't really use my surname online. I suppose I like the kind of privacy that comes with
We
that.
don't either. Yeah.
So kind of James Gent Z, I suppose. Yeah, it's almost like a surname.
I ended up kind of flipping it, and I was like saying, like, oh yeah, Nathan, like Gent Z James has agreed to, to an episode and all.
Sometimes people will email me like, "Dear Gent," as if like, that's my first name and Z is my
your
second
given
name. Yeah,
Your last name probably doesn't start with Z though.
it doesn't. No,
Safe assumption.
Yeah.
that's true. Yeah,
And so how long have you had the kind of brand going in this form?
only a year and 3-4 months.
Oh,
it
wow.
will be. September last year is when I published my first video on YouTube, which is where everything really started from.
Yeah, no, definitely. But I imagine you're spread across all the different platforms now.
Yeah, I'd say YouTube is still my main one, but I have an online community which is hosted on School.
Yeah.
Instagram is getting a lot bigger for me than it used to be. And I did do a podcast for a while that's on Spotify, just Gent Z podcast, which I'm going to bring back pretty soon. Yeah.
This is lit a fire. This is news
season
to me.
2 for sure.
Oh my
Absolutely,
God.
it's coming. Yeah.
There you go. All right. So, of course, people are hearing the accent at first, and they want to know, like, Nathan and Joseph seem to interview a lot of Chicago people. Who is this guy with the British accent? Where are you from, James?
Yeah, long story, but I'll give you a brief rundown. So I was born in Alabama in the US.
Wow.
And that's why I have the accent I do. My parents are English, and my dad had come over to the US with my mom at the time to do a degree at University of Alabama. And there was like an exchange program going on with his company where he wanted to do this master's degree. So they said, okay, you can come to Alabama, work on this project for a while. And they just happened to have me while they were there. But I moved when I was like 3 months old. So I have no recollection of it. Wasn't developing any kind of speech patterns at that time.
Yeah, no.
And then I've just lived in England and Wales pretty much all my life until a few years ago. But we moved around a lot. We were one of those kinds of families. So I don't think my accent ended up being particular to
Any
one region or the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I lived in Wales from 10 or 11 to 18.
Wow.
But, which is quite a formative
no,
period.
100%,
But I didn't really pick up a Welsh accent.
Yeah, I feel like it's pretty calcified at that point. I want to say accents. I doubt you can pick something up there. Yeah.
It can be. I mean, definitely as an adult. I've noticed that some people change their accent a bit over time. When I went back to the UK, people said, like, you sound a bit American.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it depends
Can rub
who's
off on you.
listening. People have a different perspective.
Yeah. So how did you end up in Chicago?
So I came to the US when I was 23, so about nearly 3 years ago. And because I was born in Alabama, I have the dual citizenship and a passport, so it's pretty easy.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to take advantage of it. It was post-pandemic. I needed a bit of a change in my environment. So I came to LA. I had one friend in LA. I had a job offer in LA as well. So, okay, LA was the place for me. I lived there for 2 years. I liked it, great weather. Wasn't really my overall dream town though.
Yeah.
So when I left there, I kind of thought, where should I go? And I had a job offer in New York. So I went to New York. But while I was in New York, like very quickly, it just kind of the stars aligned where Gent Z became a lot more popular during that literally 6-week period. And I kind of thought, I might do this full time, like fairly soon. And New York, for me, I feel like it has gone downhill a little bit.
In what time span? Like, did you witness it
I
go downhill?
visited
or?
it before, like a year or two ago, and I just thought, it's not quite as good as I remember.
Yeah.
And it's pretty expensive for what you get for your money. So, thinking I'm going to be fairly free in terms of my geography with work, I thought, I don't know if I want to sign a lease, for a year on a place in Manhattan. So I kind of just started from scratch, and I thought, I love cities. I like living in America. I've been to LA, New York. What's next? Chicago, probably.
Yeah.
And I had a friend who used to live here, a friend of mine from LA, and she said to me, I think you'll love it there. You just got to go. So I came to visit, checked out a few places to live, and I moved there like a week and a half later. I didn't know a single person when I moved here, though.
Big?
Yeah.
No, it's kind of Chicago by default. It feels like describing it, but that's not. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, I feel like I kind of arrive at Chicago by process of elimination as well. It's like I want to live in a large city. Like New York to me is a pretty bad economic value prop.
Yeah, it is.
LA is just not my bag. And then so what does this leave? Like, San Francisco, I'm not a tech worker. I can't really do that. It's like only
San
for
Francisco
them.
as well. There's not that many people that live there.
No.
In
It's
terms
the Bay
of population,
Area,
it's like a quarter of the size of Chicago.
Yeah, no, someone told me it has like a smaller population than Grand Rapids or something. Like,
Yeah, there's like
crazy.
a Fran Lebowitz quote where she says America has two cities, New York City and Chicago, and then she calls San Francisco a village, and then every other city she says isn't really a city.
It's a
I
town.
heard, I don't know who said this. It was some kind of cantankerous writer in the 60s. He said America only has two cities, New York and San Francisco. Everything else is Cleveland, Ohio.
Oh man,
As in, like, no other cities have character in that way. But I think that's bullshit.
Yeah.
I don't agree with that.
No, I always use Cleveland as a butt of my jokes. Like when I'm talking about something that's like anonymous suburbia, I always say like a suburb outside of Cleveland. 'Cause to me, it's like two steps
like,
reviewed.
I think
It's
that's
like
the whole point of it, right?
yeah. That's kind of what people want. Like they're getting what they.
I need
pay
to
for in that
go
sense.
to experience.
Yeah.
because I've lived in the places that I have lived, and I live in not really a typically residential part of Chicago, right? I'm not really in.
You're very downtown.
like with typical Chicagoans. I don't feel like I've had a very American experience yet of
I wouldn't
living here.
say so either. Yeah, meeting you and the few people we've gone out with and stuff, we're all centered in a very like downtown part of Chicago.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's something that reminds me of what a friend told me, which is that he had made some British friends at work, and he was like, "Oh yeah, come up to like Lincoln Park with me," and they're like, that's really in the boonies up there. Like that's really far out. And so I think a lot of international transplants to Chicago treat Chicago like a European capital, where it's like you want to live as downtown as you can afford. You want to live as close to the action
But I
as
know,
you
like
can.
where I live was nothing was going on there for a long time, right? You were telling me it was like parking lots.
Yeah, parking lots like semi-industrial and all that. But
Yeah.
then it's adjacent to a part that's always been.
You're
like,
near the
going-
river, right?
Yeah.
Well, the river used
I think
to
we're kind
be
of dancing
industrial.
around it. I don't know if we want to give away.
Yeah, no,
his
it's fine.
location. That's what we're doing.
You can tell from your stories though that
No, I'm on the river. Yeah. Take your pick. Which one? Which building it might be.
exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the Chicago River used to be incredibly industrial. Like the river water was really, really dirty. Like I grew up with the Chicago River in my backyard on the north side.
Okay.
And like if you got a drop of that on your lips, you'd be sick for weeks growing up.
Yeah.
It's gotten better. Like we have a friend Eli who has actually swam in the river multiple times and not died.
Like back when I first came here, like 10 years ago, I remember someone telling me, like, yeah, my buddy went on a kayaking trip and he capsized and he got pink eye in both eyes. And that was just all I knew about the Chicago River for about 5 years.
It's funny because I watch the boats go by on the river all the time, and mostly it's the water taxi, it's the sightseeing tour. But then every now and then I'll see some seriously industrial boats going by carrying
along.
just tons of gravel.
Yeah, no, it still gets
really
used
kind
for
of
stuff.
removes the picturesque part of it. You see people kayaking, and then
Yeah, and then a barge.
literally a huge barge carrying a crane.
No, I like seeing that. I'm like, oh, we aren't just an information economy like city. You
that's
know, we
true.
still have manufacturing.
I
and
was
stuff.
surprised as well that the Riverwalk is only like 20 years old.
Oh, yeah,
That's one of those things
yeah.
that to me, it just seemed like that would have always been there.
Yeah, it's like what a waste.
The
if you
river
didn't have-
probably used to smell. Like you didn't
Yeah,
wanna go
it's not a
down
nice
there.
part to live to. It totally
Yeah.
like flopped in that way. But yeah. So you talked about like we've had the Gent Z brand for a year and change, and so what kind of kicked it off? What started all this?
Yeah, good question. I don't know exactly what it was, but I'm glad that I came up with the idea. I think I've always been a creative person to an extent. Even when I was a little boy, I was writing plays and making people act them out at lunchtime. I was coming up with, I think if I'd known what YouTube was when I was a kid, I would have wanted to do it. It just wasn't a thing. So I was looking for some kind of passion project at the time. I was actually studying advertising at night school and working as a journalist in the day. So I was looking to do a bit of a career change. But I just didn't feel like either of those pursuits were really pulling my heartstrings in the right way.
Yeah.
You know, like they're good jobs, and maybe advertising has that creative element, which drew me to it. But I needed to do something. I wasn't making music anymore. So something to fill that gap.
I didn't know about that.
Yeah,
Past life.
yeah.
Did you sing or play instruments?
Yeah, I sang, played instruments, wrote songs, produced music, like a kind of Prince, like just like not musically, but like he just did everything.
Yeah,
whatever
everything,
needs to
like
be
a
done
control.
to make the song.
Like,
I'm a guitar player.
auteur,
Really, I'm like an electric guitar player. Wow. But I would just do whatever needed to be done to bring my vision to life. And I suppose I ended up having some kind of idea for Gent Z and like what this channel could be, because I was watching guys for a long time like Alpha M. This will mean people like, if you're into style, you'll know these guys probably, like Alpha M, Antonio Centeno, Gentleman's Gazette.
Yes, that I know.
So I was watching those guys for a long time, but and I thought, I could do something like this. I had a bit of not even imposter syndrome, because it was accurate. Like I didn't know
you were
anywhere near as much about those guys. I didn't have a huge wardrobe like those guys did, but I thought, I'll just start and it will grow from there, and my own knowledge will increase like the more I do it.
And then I wanted to ask a question too. Okay, so do you consider yourself to be part of the manosphere at all, or an alternative to it? It must be hard to talk about masculinity in the current media environment without getting lumped in with them.
The more I've learned about what the manosphere means, no, I don't consider myself part of it. I think I used to have this naive impression that it was just anything that was related to like
guys.
men's discussion.
That is very naive.
Yeah, but I've learned since that that's not what it is. It seems to me like the manosphere is more incel kind of stuff, men going their own way, extreme red pill. The kind of guys that make Andrew Tate look fairly mild. So no, I don't consider myself a part of that. I consider myself, maybe adjacent to some people kind of like Andrew Tate or Fresh and Fit, I like to think that maybe there'll be a young guy, and I've got it, people telling me this, they maybe watched those guys for a while, and then they found what I'm doing and thought that was more appealing to them.
Yeah, I think that's, it would be very nice to be the cure for like that kind of like thing, or an alternative, or a way to like off-ramp guys.
Exactly, and it's not even necessarily like about me. It's more the ideas that I present, the examples that I use.
Yeah. I think that you are like, Gentleman's Gazette is what I'm most familiar of all the things you were naming. I think we've brought them up maybe on the Trad episode or so, but it's guys who are like very into classic menswear, often to a much like firmer degree, almost getting into period dressing, I would say.
It's almost like, and I mean this in a nice way, but it's like a costume kind of thing. Almost.
I always say like period dress, costuming, that's a kind of side of menswear that's pretty alien to me, because I'm always about like, what can I actually wear? Like, what can I go out and like, not in a hyper-controlled environment with other like online menswear guys. Like, no, I want...
And
like,
as you say, it is very just menswear.
Yeah.
They've branched out a little bit, but for me, I wanted it to be anything and everything I was interested in.
Yeah.
And at the start, it was pretty much just style. But there's only so many videos you can make about that before it gets redundant. I don't want to keep talking about Chelsea boots every single week. There's more to life. So I just expanded it really to anything that I was interested in, as long as it fit in with something that a young man might also be interested in too.
You're more like a lifestyle brand.
I'd say so. Yeah, lifestyle, I like that term.
I mean, we run into the same question too, of just like, all right, we have to come up with a topic every week and all that. Like, we sometimes like want to hem ourselves in into what we think are the themes and the idea of our project, and other times we're like, oh, we're just really personally interested in this, and so we want to talk about it.
And I'm feeling that more right now. Pokemon was fun, but we need to get back to urbanism.
It's always good to kind of like
Pokemon.
I don't know. We just thought we'd talk about Pokemon for a week. I was at first very against it, because I'm like, we can't talk about video games. That's lame, like all that stuff. But it was touching on, I don't know, like ideas of, recycling and selling childhood to people, nostalgia,
That's
that stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, and so it was like fun to do, but it's like, where does this fit into the whole archetype of our project, which is more so leaning on.
Sometimes you have to experiment, though.
Yeah. You never know what's going to like, I don't know, you just kind of float stuff out there and you judge the reaction to it.
I find that I got to this phase a few months ago, maybe even more recently, where you come up with this idea and this schema of stuff that you're going to talk about, and then you put it out there, and people interpret it in perhaps like a slightly different way to what you had originally intended. It's like if you're in a band, you make a certain type of music, then you get a fan base. Then they start telling you what they want you to do. And it's like, well, if I listen to you, I'm just going to repeat the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of ignore that and just go ahead with your idea.
Yeah, you have to give the people what they don't know that they want. Like you can't just give them
you
more
have to keep
of what
it
they
interesting
want.
for yourself as well. Like I would get bored if I just did style videos now.
Yeah.
Or like how to be more masculine.
Yeah. No, you'll like get to the bottom of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to ask, what are your favorite places to shop in Chicago?
I honestly don't do a whole ton of in-person shopping. There's a Suit Supply here, which is a great store. I like that.
Joseph took me there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a nice place.
Yeah, I've taken like 3 friends to Suit Supply. I think they hate me there because I'm like kind of like, I don't know. I feel like I'm brought in as like an owner's rep basically.
Right.
And I'm just like, all right, let's get my friend a good suit. But I'm kind of
There's a lot of
extraneous.
nice people who work there.
Oh yeah, they're great.
Some of them, not so much. I will say that.
Yeah,
It's not always.
interesting.
I just buy most of my stuff if I'm going to buy from them online.
Yeah.
You know, in terms of brands that I like to wear, Fort Belvedere, which is owned by Gentleman's Gazette, like accessories by those guys, ties. I like a lot of vintage stuff like you do.
Yeah.
You know, especially accessories, shirts, Charles Tyrwhitt, all my shirts from there.
That's what you're wearing, Nathan. I gave Nathan a shirt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot to bring my dress shirt. So thank you, Joseph.
And then I love how people start dressing up around me. It's a great feeling.
You're gonna
meet
the
James.
thing.
Like you got to wear a shirt. Come on. And then for shoes, Thursday boots. I wear a lot of their shoes. I'm wearing those right now. There's a company called Boardroom Socks.
Oh man, I've always come close out of Virginia.
No, they're from North
Vermont.
Carolina or South Carolina. So I always wear like these really long socks.
Yeah, no, I always
They're great. They're
yeah,
great.
I always wear over the calf socks.
And then a bit of Todd Snyder. That's a new brand that I've been wearing. This is from Todd Snyder. Yeah. That's pretty much it. I used to wear a lot of Brooks Brothers, but these days probably a little bit less so.
They'll be back soon.
Yeah.
I mean, their collapse was what, a year and a half, 2 years ago?
Which
or
one?
so?
I feel like they've had a lot.
Oh, many.
Of,
Yeah. It takes them about, I think after 2
it's
years.
like a drunk guy. Like he's at one collapse, then another one.
Another one. Yeah. And usually you get like a good period of like 2 years after where they get the Made in USA shirt factories going up again. I was in a J. Crew the other day and having the time of my life. I had to like.
I like J. Crew as well.
They're back. They're back in a big way.
Where do they have a physical store?
In 900 North Michigan, that mall, on Mag Mile, the top of Mag Mile. Yeah,
there's a few. Isn't there one on the Southport Economic Corridor?
Yeah, I think that's like that's a real J. Crew, and there's a J. Crew factory on Diversey.
Okay,
over there. Yeah, but yeah, and then I don't know. I could just keep on talking about clothes forever. But no, the reason we pulled you on the show and stuff is that we just
haven't actually even said the topic of that episode yet.
We've touched on it. Yeah. So the reason we brought you on the show is that we just.
Because we're good friends.
But the broad reason is to talk about like modern masculinity, because you're someone who, as we alluded to, like is adjacent to the manosphere world, and it's just something we've been thinking about, which is this idea that like, I don't know, I've heard before that like, you know, masculinity this, masculinity that, and I've heard this take that like, if you have to actively think about it and like analyze it, then that's not masculine. Like that's the opposite. You're missing the point. And what I've kind of been like coming to is that like, you know, in the past, you didn't really have to think about it. You were surrounded by masculine role models. There was more structure. There was more community. There were more institutions. And so it was just kind of like you're drafted into it.
Gender segregated spaces.
Yeah, that too. And there was just like, it's kind of like in bowling, like you had the bumpers up basically, like the kind of gave you a framework. And now, for various reasons we'll get into, like some of that stuff has kind of fallen away. And so it feels like men need to actively do this stuff.
I know.
Yeah, and that's where kind of your cachet comes in. Is
a little bit, yeah. You know, I was talking about this with a friend last night because I knew I was coming on the podcast and we were going to talk about this. And I said literally what you said, and it was kind of ironic that, you know, in order to be masculine, we have to talk about being masculine. Yeah. It's but then again, I think it's just a philosophical discussion. Yeah. In the same way that people have always had. And these are just the terms that we're using right now.
Yeah.
But I think the reason that we have this discussion is because there are so many different ways you can be a man today.
Yeah.
And some of them are new, some of them are more old.
Yeah.
So I think people are just interested in discovering. It's more of a question of what kind of man do I want to be, because there used to be fewer options.
Yeah, fewer types of guys.
Yeah,
I would say.
exactly.
I think this the comedian Chelsea Peretti, like in one of her stand-up bits, was just like, "There's all new genres of guys that they're inventing now."
Yeah,
like,
and there's always been archetypes of different types of men, and I'd say I've not always been this version of me.
Yeah,
since being a young man.
Yeah. No, I think I've also like had different phases and stuff.
Different eras. That's like I'm in my masculine era.
Yeah.
Everything is an era right now.
To touch back on something you said earlier, the amount of choices. Are you familiar with the work of Margaret Mead, the American anthropologist?
No, tell me.
She wrote about Samoan young girls and then contrasted that to young girls in the United States. But she talked about how many choices American youth have to make and how being a teenager here is this very stressful, confusing experience.
Yeah.
And even once you're an adult man, you still have so many options to choose from, but people don't really like that. But, I think
they don't like her theory.
They don't like the choices.
They don't like the options.
They don't like all the options.
Okay.
It's too much to choose from. Like there's this other thing I'm thinking of. It's a quote from K-Hole where it's like, people used to be born into community and they had to find individuality. Now people are born with individuality and they have to find community.
Yeah.
But people don't like having to pick.
Yeah.
I think there is a pain that comes with decision making, because with decision making there comes some kind of paralysis, right?
Yeah.
Where you're not sure which one to do. The positive side of that is when you had like a very rigid idea of what a man was, if you happen to not fit into that could cause you a great deal of distress. Whereas now it doesn't.
Yeah, it's just like, all right, I'm not that type, but which type am I? Like, which type of dude? Like,
and ultimately, I think you have to make your own.
Yeah,
type.
that's
You
the
can
like
pick
final
little-
thing is like,
you
an
choose
individual
bits
and all
from
that.
so and so. I think if you're having a role model, for example, the people that I look up to in terms of finance are not the people that I look up to in terms of physique.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh, Dave Ramsey's great. I'm not going to go to him for diet advice.
Yeah, you pull from all these different areas.
People, and the same can be with
100%.
whatever your idea of masculine or feminine is.
Yeah.
You have different archetypes, and you're probably a blend of a few.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I forget who I was talking to, but I was just saying that, like, I think people might not expect this of me, but I think I have a pretty broad umbrella of like masculine, of what I would include as being masculine in that. I think that we try and sort it in that, but like, I think that also when you really break down some like behaviors and acts that like you and I would consider masculine, like I was ironing my shirts today.
Yeah,
and I'm like,
exactly.
I see this as a deeply masculine thing, but also maybe I'm reaching a breakdown in like the word of masculine.
Definitely not. I mean, the era that we grew up in, I think, was a time when, like, if somebody knew I ironed my own shirts in school, they probably would have called me gay and bullied me, Whereas that was pretty dumb, you know. So I think that's like a freeing thing that you can. The idea that you can just take care of yourself. As a man, that to me was something that in the 40s and 50s seemed to make sense, right?
Yeah,
men would take
part
pride
of
in their
it, yeah.
appearance. It was a masculine thing to do. Like, I don't necessarily think you need to do it now because it's masculine. I just think you should do it, and
as a
don't
human thing.
and don't allow some fear of, oh, I'm not a man if I wipe my ass properly. to be not masculine.
We had an episode, our most recent one was about McBling, which is this era of like over the top wealth and ostentatiousness around like 03 to 07. So for you guys, that would be more cool Britannia type
that was
of
in the
period.
90s.
Oh, that was in the 90s? Oh,
but that wasn't really about wealth. I think that was just more great
like,
music and just being
pop culture, like
culturally
presence.
on top. But I remember that era in American culture.
It came over to you guys, of course. And we were trying to kind of get to the bottom of like, was this an especially like low grade homophobic period? Because it felt like this is where it kind of became like, it's lame to take care of yourself. Like things like The Man Show. This was it Spike TV?
I never watched that.
This was this like, I think it's gone now. It must be. It was a cable channel that was just like, it's by guys, for the dudes. It's all sports, women, like that kind of. It was a very like strange development
What programs did they have on that though?
They had like 1,000 Ways to Die. They had just
so it wasn't their own shows. They would just syndicate stuff.
No. They had shows and stuff, and they had one that was called like The Man Show, and I think Jimmy Kimmel was involved in it or something. But it was just super like, hey, dudes, let's have a great manly. It was a very strange type of
the culture in the UK at the time, which I grew up in, was what's now called lad culture.
Oh yeah.
Which was just basically heavy drinking, magazines with
Breasts.
boobs out. Yeah. Just in the supermarket. My mom bought me Nuts magazine.
Wow.
Yeah.
I remember seeing these like as a kid in Germany. I remember seeing them and then going to England and then being like, wow.
I think
just
it was,
at eye level as a child, like this is crazy.
Yeah. So like a lot of drinking, Larryness.
Larryness. Is that just broiness, I imagine, or just
kind
like
of like it's kind of like an English version of like being a frat boy type, you know, like
on a stag do being unbehaved,
just like drunk.
Is being a Larry a noun? Or is
Sorry?
Larry? Would you call someone a Larry, or would you just say they're Larrying, or what?
No, you say like he's being Larry, kind of like an adjective. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Wow. Okay, it is an adjective.
Yeah. So that was the culture that I grew up in. And that I'd say that was pretty predominant until maybe 2010, 2011. I think that's when it started to die down.
So I think what was like the hinge point between these two things, like the overt, like kind of like, I don't know, how did you, dopey kind of man, kind of like grunt type of man. I don't know what I'm getting at, but
not very cerebral at least.
Was like, remember the website Art of Manliness?
Yeah.
That thing? So it had like old timey like Victorian illustrations of like a buff guy. This is when mustaches were becoming very big, especially like artsy ones. I think that was the pivot or hinge point between these two things.
That was a really interesting thing to do at that time. I think that's why it became so big.
Yeah.
Not that, I'm on anywhere near the same level as Art of Manliness was, but sometimes when you see what's going on in a culture and you do something that's different, you offer an alternative like that did, that's when it becomes popular. For me, I was seeing a lot of people's idea of hyper masculinity would be like Andrew Tate, right?
Yeah.
Or it's all about money, it's about muscles. Whereas I would watch something like James Bond or like a Cary Grant movie from the 50s and 60s and think, to me, that's more the kind of man that I want to be. Yeah. So that's the alternative. That
you weren't seeing it in the media out
No,
there,
I wasn't
so
really.
it's like
no.
you have to fill that kind of niche.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. I think a lot of this can be like kind of told through suiting in a way, because hinging like off of this Art of Manliness period, I think in men's fashion, this was kind of the hashtag menswear period. You remember? Have you ever heard this?
I wasn't really into it at the time.
This is like retroactively applied, I feel, nowadays. But yeah, it's like the super tight suits. Like guys were wearing suits more, but in this very like always showing your ankles, always tightly cropped. And it's funny because I think that like when the guys like Andrew Tate and stuff do wear suits,
they wear that.
They kind of wear it in that way. They're
do,
kind of like lagging behind. And so, yeah, I think someone brought this up about Jordan Peterson, which is that like, even though he alludes to this like classic masculinity and earlier forms of masculinity, he's dressed like a late 2000s metrosexual.
I don't agree with that.
You don't agree with that?
I don't feel like that's how he dresses personally.
I think he's
also an older guy.
Yeah. I just think his fits are very tight.
Suits though, right?
Well, he's kind of gone away from the realm of style, and I think it's more just like part of his brand now to where almost his suits are symbolic of his ideas rather than just being stylish.
Yeah, he's wearing them on his sleeve. Yeah,
exactly.
I think this is post his like benzo withdrawal thing. And
let's be nice to him.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah. No, do you think a lot of guys come to your stuff from a Jordan Peterson angle?
There is definitely some. Yeah, I know that I have some Peterson fans. I will say, for me, as an 18-year-old scruffy goth with an incredibly like chaotic and disorganized life, Peterson was actually a pretty big influence on me. I'd say he was one of the first. I think it was the first time that I'd considered the idea that you could improve yourself. It wasn't anything to do with being a man really, but the idea that you could look at your life kind of from this bird's eye view and say, I'm going to try and move this piece on the chessboard forward, and I'm capable of doing that. Because for me, I grew up in like a pretty middle-class kind of environment, but I didn't see people deliberately bettering themselves.
Oh, it was just maintaining.
Yeah.
It was just
it was kind of like things just happen to you. Yeah. And even if I saw a guy who was in amazing shape, it didn't really register to me that,
that he had done a sequence of things to get to that point.
It was like, oh, that's just a muscly.
He's always been like
that's a muscly guy.
That's so like interestingly like present. I would say like a presentism, like it's just thinking about like things.
But I think
as they've
that
always been.
You can have that until quite a late age, and I think some people never
break out of it.
Yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a fan, or I used to be. I mean, it's been several years, but like when I found Jordan Peterson's work, I also kind of liked it, but I found it in this really bizarre way that's going to make you laugh. I found out about Jordan Peterson's work through like a DEI course that I did in 2020,
Wow.
the Theory of Enchantment.
Somebody fucked up that course.
Yeah, no, he was included in several different parts of it, but
Okay.
In a positive way, in a cautionary way?
in a good way.
Wow.
There,
Wow, he'd be surprised. He would be.
Yeah, somebody got fired for that.
No, seriously, I learned about Jordan Peterson in a DEI course.
Wow, fascinating.
But yeah, we included him in. We talked about him a little bit in our moral codes episode. But yeah, he has some interesting.
I'm increasingly
ideas.
sympathetic to him. I think I tease him because he's become like kind of. If he started off as a moderating figure and as a voice of reason in a decently unreasonable like environment of discourse, I think that he's kind of gotten caught up in the whirlwind that he's created. You know, his personal
it's like
life
what I was
and
saying
stuff.
earlier. You know, sometimes you put a message out and then your audience tells you what they want, and it becomes this self-perpetuating thing. So for me, you know, now he's doing work with Daily Wire. I never would have really associated his early works of thinking he's going to go down this pigeonhole.
Yeah, of being
and
like
I don't
a
think
political
he's really
talking head.
changed his views on that. It's more that I think he's just found a home, and you know, it's not particularly a home that I would like to see him in. But as long as he doesn't compromise what he's saying, which I don't think he will, because he doesn't need to.
Yeah.
You know, he as a force is just as impactful as the entire Daily Wire.
Yeah, him as like
it's hard
his
to
body
think
of work and his like
it's hard to think of many people full stop that have had an impact on so many people's way of thinking about their own lives.
No, I find so many like quotes and stuff that are like I'm like, this is amazing. I see Jordan Peterson at the end and I'm like, you got Joseph, you like the guy. Like I really like, it's just stuff that I feel like I've kind of I think I've arrived at my own, but I feel like I'm probably like in spaces and stuff that are owing things to him.
And
so
I don't
gotta
think
give the guy credit.
I think he's a pretty common sense guy as well. But he has a way of saying relatively common sense things that are they become inspiring when he tells them to, like make your bed. How everybody's mother told them to do that growing up, but nobody listened to her.
Yeah, now it comes from this like very strange like Canadian psychologist, and then it's like it's coming from a new environment.
When he first came out, there was like a darkness to him, which I thought was kind of appealing to
Alluring,
people. Like he's like this older kind of gaunt guy who's like quite a disciplinarian.
Yeah.
So
that's
that
what people
was
needed.
Something interesting in that. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm very fascinated. We've talked about this before in person, but just the whole kind of like self-improvement world and economy, especially like online. Like, you know, what is the end state of this? Like,
I don't think we know yet. I think that it's going to be positive though. And I think particularly for the generation below us or like the very young Gen Z, you know, think about these guys are learning about stuff like journaling, like working out, or, you know, working through your own stuff, whatever that needs to be. They're learning about that at such a young age that, you know, when we were 12, 13,
oh my God,
we weren't, you know, we were watching like the Pooh and Wee song on like Weebles.com. You know, it wasn't, the internet was not used in an intelligent way.
Yeah.
Whereas now I could totally see, like, imagine if I was 13, 14, I might have stumbled across like Peterson or even if it was somebody that I don't think is necessarily the greatest role model. They might pick up some ideas from that that are good. So to have that advantage when you're like 13, 14, I think it's going to be impressive what the next generation
I also didn't
does.
realize like our 13, 14-year-olds out there like bullet journaling, reading Atomic Habits.
I think they are.
Kind of
I really
stuff.
think they are. It's not the majority.
Yeah.
But if it's a 1% and it's a subculture, I don't think that existed before.
Do you get comments where it's like, I love your work, I'm 12 years old?
I seem to get like Instagram messages or emails from like 13, 14, probably the youngest, or I get a lot of messages from older people.
Yeah.
If you read my comments,
it's a lot of like, I wish men were still like this.
but you would think that my audience is a lot older, but when I look at the demographics, it's not. It's just I think older people like to comment.
Yeah, they think they need to be heard. I think there's a lot of things like someone wants to see this comment. So
they're retired.
Put it out there. Yeah, they got
I
more
appreciate
time.
it for sure.
But yeah, back on the self-improvement economy, you know, self-improvement, I don't know if you know this, I'm a librarian for the Chicago Public Library.
Okay.
But that, along with cookbooks, are the most popular like nonfiction categories. But,
What do people take out? Self-improvement books. What are some of the popular
Oh,
ones that
popular
people
ones.
grab. Yeah.
Well, honestly, my library does not have good circulation. It's like we had 11 people come in today. I'm serious.
Oh my God.
It was a Sunday.
Yeah.
But it's not great. So I can't actually. We aren't getting enough out that I can say like what's popular at my branch. But yeah, I do think though that like, on this question of like what's the end state. Eventually, like these things can become habitual. Like that should ideally be the end. It's like it becomes a habit that just comes naturally. And I think that like a way that happens is something that's referred to as habit stacking. I'll link something in the show notes where basically it's like if you want to form a habit, if you link it to an existing one, that's the best way to form a new one.
Yes.
I have a rule that like when I have my morning coffee, I'm not allowed to scroll my phone. I'm only allowed to do Duolingo, like for the duration of the coffee, because that's the good phone activity in my mind. Like learning a language.
Well, I think that self-improvement, it might be something that you really latch onto for a few years even. But beyond that, it's meant to give you a foundation or a toolkit which you can use to accomplish greater things, right?
Yeah.
When we have children, we teach them how to brush their teeth. But you don't spend your whole life watching videos about brushing your teeth, like reading about brushing. Oh, I'm brushing my teeth. I could do this technique. You just go, okay, I've done that now, and now I have nice teeth, and I'll carry on with my life.
Yeah, you just implement it into your life.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of things about self-improvement that are like that, and it's easy to get caught in this web, especially because people make great YouTube videos about these topics, to just keep consuming this content.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not even necessary to keep consuming it. Yeah.
No, but I don't know. It's the nature of making content, which is that like no matter how shallow the pool of knowledge is, like you still need to scrape it to the bottom. Like you have to make all the content.
There's always new people.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'll get a question, for example, going to a style example. Like a very, very basic fundamental would be, you get those sets where it's like a matching tie and pocket square.
Oh yeah,
that's like the classic beginner thing of like, you don't do
rookie
that.
mistake.
Yeah, rookie mistake.
It's right when you know enough to be dangerous.
Yeah, so I think I'm not going to make a video mentioning that because everybody knows that. But then I'll get questions asking about that. So I think, okay, maybe
I should. Maybe not everyone knows it. Yeah.
For me, I just have to follow my own interests because I have to enjoy whatever topic I'm working on, and
keep yourself interested, not let alone you're like the people who consume your content. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
yeah. I feel like that with like guest episodes too, because for us, like our episodes where it's just the two of us are the most popular. But like we look forward to having guests on.
Guys.
no, you're gonna blow up the numbers on this one. We're all
no, but yeah, it's like that keeps us interested too. It's like collaboration. So there's things to work towards and look forward to.
It's hard doing like a 1-man or a 2-man show when it's just you two. You know, to be come up with ideas and be interesting all the time. It's one of the reasons I want to revive the podcast because there are people with like great ideas out there, and I want to meet them and talk to them. And I love podcasts myself. I'm always listening to podcasts.
Consuming it. Yeah.
What's your favorite?
Probably Modern Wisdom. Chris Williamson is my favorite.
You mentioned that one before.
Yeah, that's a great one.
Yeah,
just hit 3 million subscribers.
Yeah. It is just nice to have a podcast as an excuse to interview people.
Oh,
like,
it's for sure.
I thought this was like everyone's dream. Like I always thought like being like an interviewer was kind of like, but I don't know. Not everyone's very drawn to it. I just think it's fun.
It is, and
nice.
Obviously not everybody should do it, but if you have an interest in it, then you'll get better at communicating.
Yeah,
and you'll be able to connect with interesting people much more easily.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And I actually like did ethnographic work for undergrad. I also went to Brazil. So I actually learned how to do interviews in a way that's much more academic than most people.
Right.
It comes to me like naturally though. I don't have to even think about it.
Yeah. I just watch old Dick Cavett show interviews. That's what I do if you ever watch those. Those are fun.
I actually, it's funny we go back to this because you said, what made me start the YouTube channel? I had the idea when I was trying to get into the ad industry of I would start a podcast as a way to meet people, as a way to network without trying to appear too schmoozy, I have an ad industry podcast. Never got it off the ground yet, but I would make some TikTok videos explaining different classic ads like Ogilvy work or different advertising concepts. I never published them, but I recorded them.
The lost media.
Yeah, I never recorded them. So I thought I suppose that kind of got my juices working of the idea of creating content as something I could do.
Interesting. Oh yeah, and then going off of like people we find interesting and all that. When I'm watching your videos, I like all the like B-roll you show of different like. I mean, I'm hot off of watching Mad Men for the first time. Okay. So like seeing any Mad Men stuff, I'm like, oh hey, that's the guy. Like me pointing at the screen like that's Don Draper. But I like seeing that stuff. How do you choose the kind of cat? You mentioned Cary Grant earlier, whom I'm always very drawn to.
Yeah, Cary Grant was a big one for me. James Bond, particularly the older movies. I'm definitely in the process of expanding my points of reference and my B-roll right now. You know, for this weekend, I watched 2 movies. I watched High Noon, which is like a Western with Gary Cooper. Yeah. And I watched To Kill a Mockingbird, the old one with Gregory Peck. Yeah. So there are so many examples you can draw on, especially from that era. I would like to use more modern examples. I haven't seen too many of them recently. I think in terms of actual people, they're out there. Like I've spoken about Henry Cavill in the past. I think great role model for young guys. It just so happens that actors are more present than ordinary people are like a businessman, right? You know, so there are just more videos of them looking great doing it. You know, like it's a more
of course, more content.
It's a more aesthetic example of these ideas.
Yeah.
I know. I was just asking some friends kind of ahead of this episode of like, what role models do you have?
Right.
And
what did they say?
I don't know. Like some people were very taken aback, like, oh, I don't personally really have role models. And then someone else said that they happened to be in the process of actively writing them down, actually. And I was like, oh wow, maybe we're something in the air right now. Everyone's looking for role models.
What did they have on there?
I'm trying to think who they were saying. I can't remember. I don't think they revealed their hand.
Someone from Friendsgiving or something?
Yeah, it was someone at Friendsgiving was saying that they had a role model.
I feel like my personal ones are not necessarily the people that I portray in my videos.
Oh yeah.
Just because I suppose I relate them more closely to exactly what I'm doing in my life. So I'd say it's like half people that I actually know, half people that, you know, for me it could be somebody who's creating content, or I call it like new journalism, you know, like alternative media people.
Oh, nice.
They might not be doing the same niche as me. Like they might be wearing Crocs. But I like what they're doing. Part of it, exactly. You take a part of it.
On the actor thing, I'm always very drawn to Paul Newman. I don't know what it is. Like it's him. Like as his personality comes through, I've just seen interviews with him and his writings. Like I don't know. That's someone who I don't want to engage and celebrate celebrity culture, but I feel like if they've been dead for a while, then I'll be interested in them. As almost
he did a
lot
of great stuff outside of just his acting. You know, he wasn't just a screen star.
Yeah, it's something about like I don't know, looking at someone's life comprehensively and like seeing this guy who like was achieving great things in acting and was like, no, I actually want to race cars and make salad dressing.
I know,
and do charity.
That's amazing.
I don't know, and I just see him. He's kind of gruff in interviews is one thing because he's someone who's like tackling with a lot of I think different sides of himself that he wants to be understood. And I'm very drawn to characters like that. But yeah, how about you, Nathan? What male role models do you have?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm one of those people where I generally do not think about role models, but I think they're important in today's world where we are left with individuality, because it's kind of like, who do you want to model your individuality off of? And so for me, like my male role model is Glenn Greenwald, I suppose. He's this like, are you familiar with him?
No.
He's like a journalist. He worked with Edward Snowden, but he lives in Brazil. He's gay. He adopted 3 kids. He has 40 dogs. He has this like charity where he employs homeless people to take care of Brazilian street dogs. And but yeah, he has had a really interesting career where he's both like this very anti-establishment person, but also this like political pundit. And he kind of has the best of both worlds. But I just like see myself in him in like a lot of weird ways because I speak Portuguese and I'm not Brazilian or of Portuguese descent. And I look up to him a lot. And when his husband died, David Miranda, that like really hit me.
Yeah.
Well, think about when we're children, we have role models big time, right? We really idolize people and we grow a lot as children. So I think there is something to be said. I think we can learn a lot from children. Anytime you want to grow or expand as a person, you know, you go back to how children do that in a very rapid period of time. I think idolizing people is definitely one of those.
Yeah. No, I think that we've talked about this in the past, but like we live in such an age segregated place, like society nowadays, where you're not often like around children. Anyway.
Yeah, I never see.
And then so that's like, I don't know, like my summer camp counselor days are over. I have some friends who just had a baby, but like, I don't know, last time I saw a baby before this one. Like,
Right.
I don't know. Like I think sometimes we do lose track of that. Like,
you know where I just saw a ton of them in the Whole Foods on Ashland Avenue, near where the bathrooms are. There's this corner, and there were just like all these kids and babies and nannies and parents, and like I felt a bit odd even just passing through it to go to the bathroom.
Like you feel like rude not having a baby with you. You're just like, oh, sorry, I forgot mine at home. Like I should have brought it.
I wish I was around more kids. I love being around kids.
Yeah,
so
it just feels like,
fun.
I think it kind of puts a check on like where you've come from. I'm just, whenever I hold my friend's kid, I'm just like, oh my God, you can't even hold your head up. Like, and I used to be just like this.
Right,
Like,
yeah.
It really like, puts it all in perspective.
But yeah, I think it's harder to think of role models from the present. I think most people do look to the past more.
Yeah.
Well, we idolize people from the past more. We kind of forget their misdeeds. We smooth over the rough edges. You know, you think of somebody like JFK, right? Which is an example that I've used of, you know, a role model.
Yeah.
Like major philanderer.
Yeah.
Even something like we even idolize how good looking people were from the past. You know, like JFK. Oh, he was so handsome. Not really. Like
people say that about Jackie too. That's like a Twitter meme. It's just like,
Right.
actually she was mid.
Yeah, like these people were like mildly good looking. I think it's also the context. you know, like,
It's like
a seven
the
in
Office
politics
and all of that.
Yeah.
Everyone wore suits, and suits fit better back then.
Yeah.
I mean, compared to our modern octogenarian presidents, like a 40 or 50-year-old looked a lot better.
Yeah, no, definitely. I was talking with friends about this of like when someone dies, like, you know, so in Judaism, like we don't name people after living people, actually.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So like,
Is that a rule or is it just
it's a pretty,
like,
I
not
forget if it's
done?
like written down somewhere. It's just not
Okay.
done.
Yeah,
I would say we always name them after dead people. And there's a lot of theories for that. It's kind of like maybe a continuation of the name and all that, but in a different sense. But I always kind of thought it's because when someone dies, you kind of have like a capstone on their life, and you can kind of like, extenuating circumstances, something will come out about them after their death and change things, you know, but you have a pretty good idea of like, you know, someone's, who they were as a person. And if you like want to name your kid after them.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about like the writer Cormac McCarthy had a piece come out. He passed away last year. And had a piece come out about him recently that he had like had a 16-year-old muse that he was inspired by, and they ran off to Mexico together, and she might have actually been 13 at the time. And so his whole legacy is getting like called into question in this way.
Yeah.
But
well, we could also start doing that with everybody. You know, I was on a date a couple of months ago. We were talking about Marilyn Manson.
Oh yeah.
Right? And she was saying, you know, I find it hard to separate the artist from the art.
For Marilyn
because
Manson.
well, no, because you know he's been accused of all manner of
yeah, but that was also his vibe that he was trying to express.
I was thinking, you know, I'm not like accusing dead rock stars of anything, but you think back to like Bowie, Led Zeppelin, like you think those guys weren't having sex with underage girls? Like they definitely were.
Yeah,
definitely.
No,
were.
it was just like they were in this like.
But we idolize them, you know.
Yeah, we still like brush it over and all that.
Elvis and Priscilla was 14.
Oh yeah,
you know? But now we make movies about.
We make movies about both of them. We make separate movies for them, and then we're
Priscilla one yet.
I think the Elvis movie is like a guilty pleasure of mine.
I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah, I just thought it was. I just love to see a blonde man winning, Austin Butler. Whenever I see him in roles, yeah, exactly. Again, the most oppressed blonde man.
And then for the next section, I wanted to talk about something I sort of realized through doing the Male Desire episode, which was an episode we did a few months ago. But when I did that episode, I wrote in the docket about how there's a certain genre of man where they only eat meat and they shy away from vegetables and they don't want to be seen publicly eating vegetables.
I've heard about this, yeah.
Yeah, it's just the most like ostentatious form of fake masculinity. And it made me realize something that is kind of dumb to realize, but it's that like gender is performative. Because like as a gay man, the way that like I view masculinity or the way that it's presented is just that it comes naturally to straight men. It's not something that's taught or honed or inculcated. But doing that episode made me realize that it is. Also looking at your content made me realize that it is something that is like, again, inculcated. But you know, I think that for gay men, like they're castigated for publicly expressing interest or attempting to try to be more masculine. I think that there are a lot of examples of gay celebrities where I can look at them and like sort of mid-career, once they got a bit older, they started to dress more masculine or become more masculine. Like, for example, RuPaul was always in drag when they were younger. Then they started wearing suits sort of mid-career. Yeah. There's also like Kara Cunningham, formerly Chris Crocker, when she was still a gay man. She like had this period in the 2010s where she started to dress more like a conventionally masculine gay man. But anyways, I just think that like for gay men in childhood, it's harder for them to feel more comfortable with like masculine things and pursue masculine interests. But then by the time they're an adult, they might feel more confident and they might be able to then pursue those things. And I think that's okay for them to discover it the second time around later in life.
On their own terms, basically. Not when it's being like, not when masculinity is being imposed on them on the playground. Right. But then like...
Can I ask you a more personal question?
Yeah.
When did you realize you were gay? At what age do you think?
I mean, I would say like very young when I was a kid. Like, I mean, the earliest time I can remember having a crush on a guy was when there was like, I don't know if they do this in the UK, but you know, when there's like the buddy thing where like kids from an older year will come to the classroom and read you a book or something.
Right. That was your crush.
Yeah. I remember having
the way
a
he
crush.
read that book.
Yeah.
Okay. So do you think around that age, people were putting a certain idea about like the man that you should grow to be on you because they thought you were gay? You think that was different from how they would treat like another 8-year-old boy that they thought was straight?
Well, my childhood was very different. My mom was like very butch. She wore like a man's wedding ring. There are pictures of her and my dad wearing suits next to each other. And so I was raised actually without gender norms to a degree. I mean, to the degree you could in the 2000s, not like it would be today. But yeah, I was not taught by my dad to like boys things. It wasn't an expectation. It wasn't something that I was expected to do. But yeah, it's just I remember like trying to do sports and not feeling comfortable doing team sports. Like if you look at gay Olympians, they usually do solo sports. Like there are things that like male environments are less comfortable, you know?
I think it's always more interesting to be your own blend of different things, right? So, you know, I hope that if a gay guy is watching my video, especially if they're younger, I hope they feel like they can do all the things that I'm talking about, and that doesn't have anything to do with their
we don't own this. Like straight guys don't own like classic masculinity or any of that stuff.
It's kind of interesting to have a little bit of a blend of things that don't necessarily, you know, aren't traditional stereotypes. Like if you're a gay guy, but you're dressing like Don Draper, like there's something pretty cool about that. I think.
Or Sal from Mad Men.
Yeah, or, you know, in the same way, you might be super into a lot of very traditionally masculine things. You might be a straight man, but there's like something that you like. I don't know whether it's like a taste in art or the kind of women that you like, you know? It's like in the way I dress, you probably expect me to be with a certain type of woman, right? You can probably picture who that is. Now, it happens to be that I actually like that. You know, I do live up to that.
They're like classic, conventionally feminine women.
But I would say also, I think there's an expectation that I would be with like a trad wife.
In the like blue and white dress, like the whole deal.
And I think I like that visual presentation. But in terms of personality, I like somebody that's a little bit more... like stimulating intellectually. Like I'm not just looking for somebody to say yes to me all the time.
all the boxes. We talked about this on our dating app episode, but I said I was afraid of like being given access to like dating filters because I don't think I should be allowed to filter what I like because like what I think I like could be very different from what's actually best for me.
For sure.
You know, like don't give me the power like to restrict things of like height, like ethnicity, religion, all that stuff. Like, or if there was a filter for vibe on dating apps as well, like where you could just select like trad wife, art girl, like, all that kind of stuff.
I think those things are probably more important than like heights, eye color, etc. Like, you know, you have an archetype.
An archetype, and you can of course like you know be far outside of that and like you know have your own unique spin on it. But archetypes exist for a reason; they're useful.
But yeah, to go back to what you said about being an interesting blend, there's a Susan Sontag quote from Notes on Camp where she said something along the lines of like, in every exceptional feminine or masculine beauty, there's a hint of the other inside of it. I think there's something true to that. But yeah, I think though for gay men, it's like if they have achieved like the highest caliber of masculinity, it's then assumed that like, okay, they're naturally that way. It's not something they worked for.
There was no self-improvement in that way.
Yeah.
Like it was like, oh, they were always going to do it. That's interesting.
Yeah, because there are gay guys where you can't tell they're gay and they seem straight, but like I'm sure now, after thinking about it hard enough, they have to be trying a little bit. Like some of them maybe not, but like it's okay if they've put in work.
It's also, yeah. It's also like what we're saying about self-improvement, which is where like you can start doing something because like, all right, I'm trying to be more masculine, and then you forget that you're doing that. Like it becomes a habit or something. And I think that it's just like that.
And you want to know an example of how it's like taboo for gay guys to try to be more masculine? Okay, this might seem kind of schizo, but every time I get the opportunity, or now, like with Snapchat or Instagram, they'll just open up into like an AI chat, but when it opens up, I'll ask it a question. I'll be like, I'm a gay man. How do I make my voice sound more straight?
That's the first thing you think to ask the AI.
No, I ask it because I know they won't answer it.
Okay, you ask it like politically divisive questions.
Yeah, I do
basically.
It on purpose.
Yeah.
I wonder if you asked it, if I'm a straight man, how do I sound more gay?
I'm very happy to answer this for you.
I think I don't know. I mean, if we were betting on it, I'd say it will probably do it for you.
Yeah.
I feel like there was a period where, like, specifically on the topic of gay voice, there was a period where it was like, doesn't exist. You're not allowed to talk about it. And now I feel like we've gone back now. Everyone's like, oh yeah, it exists.
I think it exists for sure. Yeah.
It exists, but why is it? And then the next thing is like, so what? Like, it exists. Like,
the funny thing is when you meet a straight guy who has a gay voice. I actually met one last night. And it was like a friend of a friend of a friend that I didn't really talk to, but I was hearing him talking to this girl, and I was thinking, she must think he's gay. The way he's talking is very, very gay. Yeah.
Yeah. I've been accused of that in the past. But everyone has a different sense of what a gay voice is.
There's a spectrum as well.
Yeah. Oh, of course.
Sure. Yeah. And it's not necessarily like deep or high. It's more just
it's intonation and inflection.
How do you phrase stuff?
Yeah. It's more with the hand gestures than anything sometimes. But
I read something like a not very academic Reddit post recently where someone was
this
talking.
This is more my level now.
Someone was talking about how like you can infer so much from a person's voice more than any other characteristic. Like if you just listen to a short clip, and I think there is. I'm not into philosophy that much, but the Platonic ideals, like I feel like there are like underlying cultural forces that shape what a person's voice kind of sounds like, more than accent, economic status, like all these other things come through in someone's voice. I think the reason why so many gay guys sound similar, it's not because they're all friends with other gay men. They start sounding gay from a young age because there's some sort of like the lived
think it's nature
shapes their psychology, and then their voice reflects their sort of anxieties.
So it's not socially spread. It's like it's independently happening.
I think so.
It's independently happening. It's something in their behavior because they're gay is causing people to treat them differently, which causes them to resent it.
You think the gay voice is like a little bit anxious?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, I think it can be. I can definitely think of examples of that. Interesting. It can also be very confident.
Like, yeah.
I know, especially in Britain. I feel like this is a stereotype of like the really camp gay guy, like, naughty. Who's very, very confident. Yeah.
I was also thinking of on one of the podcasts that we listened to, Nymphet Alumni. It's like a fashion
Nymphet
style.
Alumni?
Yeah, it's a great name.
That's a great name.
But they talk about like clipboard gays, which are just like very on it, very like present gay guys who are like clipboard in hand, like professional, like take everything super seriously. Like I think that's also a very like powerful gay voice. I would say like that guy, if he's ordering me around like in a semi-structured environment, like yes sir. Right. He's running that ship.
You want to hear an example of why I think it's transcendental though? I don't know why, but some lesbians, they have voices that sound so much like old men.
Old men, like boomer men?
Yeah, it's just so like slow and focused. Wow. Like I don't know. I love it.
I'm trying to picture my grandpa's voice coming out of a butch lesbian, and maybe it would work.
I don't know many lesbians.
Yeah. Oh,
I can't think of a single lesbian in my life right now.
Oh wow. You make more lesbian friends, man. They're great.
Yeah. Well, sadly, there's I think only one lesbian bar in the city.
Yeah.
If you wanted to
Is it Big
lesbian
Chicks?
friends?
No.
Yeah. There's not many. There's only 50 left in the country.
Wow.
That's crazy.
There's very few.
Wow.
Oh yeah, but I think I've talked about gay stuff enough. So back to Gent Z. Okay, so what do you think is different about modern masculinity compared to classical masculinity?
Yeah, it's funny this term classical masculinity has kind of become popular in recent months.
You think it's your doing? You think it's
And just saying, after that video, there was a lot of other videos.
wow.
Well, the idea that I had with that was today, I think that there is the hyper masculine thing going on, which some guys are attracted to. But then there's also the kind of like very unmasculine, kind of watered down stuff, or guys just not really taking any kind of pride in themselves.
Yeah.
So I think the classical masculinity is kind of a blend of having a very traditional presentation or demeanor, perhaps, but as you said earlier, ironing your shirts, filing your nails, having some kind of idea that you can improve oneself without it necessarily being within money, muscles, sleeping with as many women as possible. That was like a very narrow definition that I saw out there of what it means to be a man, was like those three areas, and everything else that I saw was kind of like more feminine or just not really. I didn't see people that I looked at as a man and thought, like, that's what I'm looking to be like.
You wanted a smarter form of masculinity.
Yeah, definitely.
I was feeling this like, I don't know. I think we've arrived at a very similar like view of masculinity from very different angles. I wasn't a goth at 18, like you were. Like I don't know what the hell I was at 18, but I was in a big period of like working out. It was like right pre-COVID, and so I was just consuming tons of fitness content and all that. And I was like, I don't like the fashion sense of any of these guys. They wear nothing but sweats. They live for the gym. Like this doesn't seem very balanced. And then like I got more into menswear and stuff, and I was like part of like a Discord for it. And I was like, these guys think about clothes way too much. Some of them should be in the gym. It's one thing.
Right.
And I was just like it seems like this is all they do. And then so I feel like I've hopped around these different things, like pulling these parts of it. And as I try to like build my own sense of like, how I want to build my life. And I think that it's kind of a broad sense of like, if you do it every day, you should be good at it. If it's dressing, you should do that. You should approach your work with a certain sense of like
everything
seriously.
You do it as well as you can.
And intentionality that hopefully, like as we've talked about in self-improvement, gets to fade away a bit as it becomes more natural.
Well, coming back to the idea of classic masculinity, a way I like to think of it is like the Renaissance man, this idea that
a generalist.
You can be many different things at once, and you can work out and have good clothes and read. There's enough time in our lives to do all of these things.
Doesn't always feel like it,
but I coming back to different forms of masculinity, especially growing up and as a teenager, I saw the nerdy book guys. I saw the gym bros. I didn't really see, but I know that they're out there, like the dandies, And I kind of thought, why wouldn't you want to be a bit of all of them? They all have good ideas. They all have value. But we've all seen, the gym guy who you think, you may as well like dress a little bit nicer.
Yeah.
Or the guy that, he's kind of overcompensating with his clothes. He's peacocking so much and he's got all this vintage and all this rings and all this stuff. And you think, well, you probably could do with a little bit of
tone it down a bit.
Gym.
And that too. Yeah, it's like you spent a lot of time getting that tailored when like it would have just been easier to like hit the gym and stuff.
Or it would complete you as a person.
Yeah, it just feels like it's another like I don't know. I was talking to someone. I forget where I quoted this from. I need to actually find the source of it, but it's like specialization is for insects. Like humans are generalists. Like we should be good at all these little things. And I think that like we pigeonhole ourselves. We also let people like put us in holes. One of the times I've worn a suit out to a bar before. Right. It was for my birthday years ago, and I remember a girl approaching me being like, I guess you work in finance, huh? Right. And it really stuck with me. I'm like, God, everyone wants you to be in something. We want to make the guess and make it right. And it felt very good to be like, no, I manage construction sites for a living. Like, there you go.
I think both men and women as well like to overcompensate. So if you feel like you can't compete in the intellectual world, the cultural, the style world, okay, well, I'm going to look like a walking fridge, right? Or, maybe you went to the gym a couple of times, you didn't feel like it was a nice environment for you. Like, I don't feel comfortable here. Well, I'm going to go into the more like bookish academic thing, and that's my strength. And I think that there's something like, there's some merit to be had for that.
Yeah, know your lane, specialize, like kind of min-max it in a sense, like if you're not seeing results. But no, I think that it's like, it's okay to be a little bit shitty at a lot of things.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that it's just like, I want to keep on like adding to the list of things I can do. I just think that like capability is like one of the traits I always look for. The other day at our Friendsgiving, I took up carving the turkey, and I was just like, this just feels like something I feel like I should be able to do it. I've like done it once before, and I feel like I can step up to it.
That's quite a good masculine trait, I would say, capability. I don't feel
Carving
like for women, it's not, so desired that a woman can do everything. You know, we kind of, if anything, we kind of like it when a woman's like, oh,
I can't do that.
Yeah, exactly. But there are so many things that I wish I knew how to do, or like my father had taught me how to do. Just basic stuff that you think, there should be like a finishing school for boys.
I always think about that. I mean, I
this.
think your videos come from a kind of angle of that.
A little bit.
You're filling in some gaps.
A little bit.
Guys.
I think I fill in more of the philosophical gaps, or
they're not instructional videos.
No, but that
Gentleman's
would be cool.
Gazette is actually always very good about that. I feel like for a lot of men, like learning how to like tie a certain tie or something, or shaving tips and things.
Exactly. And Art of Manliness would do stuff like how to, I don't know, change a tire or
I think I always have a sweet spot for those. I lost my dad when I was younger.
Oh really? I'm sorry.
And so I like did lean on the internet more than most to do that stuff. And I wonder if I've sometimes like overcompensated in that way, where I've tried to like overlearn all the things that might be asked of a guy, because it's like not only did I learn what most guys' dads teach them, but I also like went extra the other mile.
Well, one thing that we haven't spoken about is, it doesn't happen in the same way, but a lot of guys grow up without a dad because their parents split up.
Yeah.
So I think that's why we see people attaching themselves to this idea of masculinity, because it's not just omnipresence.
Yeah.
They're not seeing it out and about. And most of our school teachers are female.
Yeah.
So growing up, you're catering to, we're looking to be validated and respected by women all the time.
It's I don't know, a very charged, dark part of the internet talks about this idea called the longhouse, which is that we live nowadays in a very like female, in our workplace and in education, it's a very female dominated environment where masculinity is actively punished. I don't believe in that all the way, but I do think that there's, I would say more that we live in a modern, like capitalist world where you're more, not that our society feminizes men. I don't think it always does that. I think it dehumanizes everyone a bit. And so I think that's a better way to say it.
Well, it definitely plays into cunning and intelligence rather than physical strength. Yeah. Which obviously men have a natural advantage of, right? So,
but it doesn't matter anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah, we've lost our edge.
Like we've all seen guys who, they're billionaires, but they look like, they wouldn't last 5 seconds against a fly in a boxing ring. So, but in terms of our construction of society, that's like the alpha male, right?
Yeah.
Beautiful woman.
They have acquired the most theoretical mammoths to eat, like through their billions.
But they're also
dollars.
Kind of a loser.
Yeah.
Like you very quickly change the context.
Yeah.
So for me, what's always been attractive is to, be a strong man in many different ways. So,
no weaknesses. In
the social realm, in a physical realm, in a mental realm, because I don't think society's going to change greatly, but if things do change, you want to be able to adapt.
Yeah. That's what kind of worries me about, like, speaking of billionaires, like when all the billionaires started getting shredded and hopping on testosterone and stuff, like Jeff Bezos, I'm like, what's happening? Like, are they getting ready for something we don't know about? Like, are they getting ready for like a Mad Max world where like they're going to have to manual combat people? Because it seems like that's what he's training for.
I think that's a result of like this cultural movement towards self-improvement for men. Because once you've completed the domain of finance and business, right? Done. What's next? Okay, physical pursuits. Whereas I don't think, I don't know if people were even that wealthy back in the 70s and 80s. Probably they weren't quite, but they were,
The Gulf was not as large as it is
No,
nowadays,
but there were people who at 40 years old would never need to work again.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I don't think they were like hitting the MMA gym in the same way.
No, look at, like, I always love Slim Aaron's photography, if you know him.
I mean, Yuppie's in like a Patrick Bateman way.
But I don't think they were.
You look at the
like
photos
that,
of them, like those suits were very forgiving in terms of your frame in the 80s.
Patrick Bateman is like a hyper example, but I don't think many people really like that.
No, they were just going to the fitness club. Like, look at like JFK Jr. back in the 90s. That was like the classic, stylish, sporty yuppie. And it's just like, you go to the gym 2 or 3 times
Today,
a week.
that would be pretty mid-body.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's this shifting thing. I mean, like, you and I love these like classic movie stars from the 60s, and their like shirtless scenes would get them laughed out of Hollywood nowadays.
Oh, yeah.
But like, Someone once told me I have like a 1950s 60s like
Physique,
and I'm like, good, that's all I need.
Yeah.
Like there was a bit where I did want to be like, like bodybuilder status and all that kind of thing, and it's just like, no, diminishing returns, man. I don't want to get shredded and diced.
I'm trying to get shredded right now.
Trying to get diced. I don't know.
I think there's also something that you touched on, this idea that to be super masculine is almost like slightly feminine.
Yeah.
This idea of fixating on it. I remember watching Pumping Iron, and Arnold Schwarzenegger, he's talking about, he sees his body as a sculpture, and when he's in the gym, he's chiseling away at it. There's something almost like autoerotic about that.
Yeah, the reduction kind of thing.
Yeah, and I kind of like, I look at my own progress in terms of physique as like that type of endeavor. It's like it's a very aesthetic thing as well.
Yeah, it's aesthetic. It can be called like very vain and like
it is
stuff.
But like I talk about clothes for a living, so like,
it's like, let us be a little bit vain.
Yeah,
I always jokingly call myself that, but
Right.
I don't know. I think it's just like people don't care enough about how they look in certain way. I mean, we say we have this hyper appearance oriented culture. I don't personally. Yes, I think online, I think we see that, but like from guys, I think you had said just a second ago about like having a bit of pride, and I think that a lot of men are operating from a place of shame. I would say a lot of times, like especially this is more in the clothing.
What are they ashamed of?
In the clothing sense, like men are so ashamed of standing out. I was listening to this podcast. It was just comedians, like super bro-y comedians talking to each other, and one of them was talking about he was in like a nice part of Australia, like kind of like that hipstery but a little rich area, and he was like, "Oh, this is a nice area," and then he says like, "Yeah," and then I tucked my shirt in. And I walked like a block, and I was like, "Oh fuck this! This is so gay." And he like took his shirt back out. But it's like, do you think that men think that like sensitively? There's a fear of standing out. There's a fear of looking like you care in any way. And I think it comes from a shame kind of sense. I don't know what they're ashamed of.
Shame is a pretty complex emotion. Like it's not coming to me, but I once looked into the psychological underpinnings that cause it to surface, and it's really, really complex.
Yeah, and I was like, there's that line between like in psychological terms like shame and guilt, and I forget what the operating like difference is. I think it's like guilt is when you do something about it, or like when it actually affects behavior, versus like shame is just the feeling with no action.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think about the guy who is almost afraid to dress nicely, whether it's because of he doesn't feel like he deserves to, or he's worried that people are going to say, "Oh, you're gay because you tuck your shirt in," And we all heard stuff like that growing up. Might not necessarily be for style, but like anything that you do that's somewhat of an effort is like not masculine. It's like it's seen as manly to not care. I don't see what's manly about that personally. But I've also never had the issue of wanting to fit in with other people, how they look. Like I've always enjoyed kind of subverting that. Like I've always had some level of extreme.
I think I'm somewhere in the middle. Like I've kind of expressed like in the way I dress, like my goal is like, don't directly look at me, but if you look at me, like see that I cared, like see that I put work into the details and all that.
I think that was the norm in the 50s.
Yeah, that's what
I think today people don't have this. They actually lack a level of shame to some extent. Of there's all the difference between who we are when we're at home, lying around watching TV, eating potato chips in boxer shorts. Like there's this. Like this is not public me. Okay, this is private me. I think a lot of people have lost that difference between what should be private and what should be public, which is why you literally see people wearing pajamas in the grocery store. That barrier in their minds is not there anymore. Yeah.
It's just, and I think that when you have that barrier, it makes both sides more special. I would say it makes your home life more like of a treat, and it makes going out more of a treat. I mean, the second COVID hit, I did not like the whole discourse around the flattening of work and home and all this stuff. I guess I've always been a little bit more structured.
You prefer that
in that way, that separation. Hyper casualization I rail about like too often. I think I want to like devil's advocate in my head and see like, all right, what do people actually want out of like a casualizing world? Is it purely just comfort? Like, is there? I'm trying to give them the benefit of the doubt. Like,
taken to an extreme, are we all just wearing togas?
What's the end state of
just
this? Like, what do we
onesies?
want?
What I don't know. Stretchy, what's the ultimate, most comfortable thing?
Well, what I think is sort of going on, particularly in American culture, is that parents are expected to put so much effort into their children and invest so much into them that it's sort of a sign of being a successful parent if you neglect yourself. But then, for example, you'll put your child in literal like Disney princess outfits. Like that's what I always find the most confusing to me. It's like, why is there a slob mom with a princess daughter? And then the daughter grows up to also be a slob mom, and it's just it is a
That's
thing,
true.
though, right?
Yeah, I'm saying whoa because you're right, not because I'm saying
No, I've heard I heard David Goggins talk about the fact that he dresses like shit and doesn't have a car. He said, like, I give to my family. I don't want anything. I give it to them, and I kind of
zero sum.
I kind of admire that, but also, you know, you do have enough to give to yourself a little bit as well. And I think when you have children as well, you still owe it to your partner to be an attractive husband or wife,
and to your kid. Like your kid is going to be embarrassed if you like look like that. Maybe not when they're 5, but by the time they're 15, they will.
Yeah, it was crazy. Like seeing photos of my dad when he was younger, like before me, and I was like, my dad was skinny and could dress. Like I've never seen this before. Like I literally just like my dad before he had passed, he had bought a like tactical vest that you could put cooling packets into to cool yourself down.
Is this for like the Vegas weather?
Yeah, which is true. But like that's just the ultimate like. Listen, I know like clothing should be functional, but come on,
that's
man.
very functional.
It's very I think we've sought a little too much function here. Yeah, I think that we like to frame things as zero-sum things. Like I dress like a slob, I'm out of shape for my kids to give them everything. And as a man who just visited Denmark, let me tell you that is not the case. Because I feel like the people with kids are almost hotter than those without.
Right.
I would say better dressed, more well put together. The child better dressed than most Americans, and like cute matching onesies.
It's a great excuse though. You know, I feel good about looking like a slob because look how generous I am. You know, I give so much. It's almost like. You know, sometimes you can moralize a deficiency.
It's I think I've had people like try and express that to me where they're just like, I find that people an old boss of mine was saying he was talking about going to a car dealership when he really wanted this BMW, and the lead up to the story is he gets the BMW, but he's very hyper casual, always wears a t-shirt and that stuff. And he's like, I go in there and there's all these guys in their button down t-shirts and stuff, kicking tires, and they don't go out there and they don't like none of them were actually buying the car. But I went in there, the guy wasn't giving me attention because I was just wearing a t-shirt, but I bought the car. I'm like, so you showed him by doing exactly what he wanted you to do, buying the car. And I love the villains in this story are just guys in dress shirts in a BMW dealership. They could be waiting for their car to get serviced. They could be doing anything and all that. But in my former boss's mind, they were all just like these villains waiting for him to fail. And it's like, bro, it's not that serious.
I think this idea is eroding now because people in positions of authority don't necessarily dress like it, but there used to be this idea of like, the guys in suits, you know, with all that power, their clipboards or whatever, you know, it would be like, if you go to a very working class area, especially in the UK, maybe it's true in the US too, the only time those people would encounter people in suits was like something bad had happened.
You're gonna get fired.
Or, you know, like social services are coming around. So to them, it's like, you know, the guy in the suit is not on our side. But I do think that clothing used to signify status, that link is eroding now. I think it's more just a personal expression.
The exec wears a t-shirt, all that kind of thing. Like tech has had a large deal to do with that, I would say.
Because it was a counter signal, but we've counter signaled so hard that it's just become the norm now.
But I have this theory that like the working class, like those people used to always own suits, but for a reason of like weddings, funerals, church, like that kind of thing. Like it'd be strange not to, like, because nowadays we have people who are like, I'm a plumber, why would I own a suit? And that would be an insane thing for like, I don't know, like an Italian plumber in New York in the 50s to say. Like, people are going to be born and die and have their first communions. Like, of course I have a suit. Like, what does my job have to do with that? My life has senses of occasion immune from my like economic status. And now I think that there is more of like, there's this really dumb tweet by some like reactionary person online showing like medieval peasants who would wear these like hoods, you know, and then like modern men who wear hoods, and it's like the poor, they know that they should hide themselves or something. It's just an insane take of just like the peasant urge to hide your face under a coif.
But it's not peasants anymore. I've seen photos of my granddad on my dad's side worked in a factory all his life. I've seen photos of him, you know, on vacation holiday with my grandma in the 50s wearing a suit like on the beach.
Yeah.
You know? And but in work, work day, he'd be covered in oil and in overalls. But
it was totally independent. It's like, why would that define who I am?
Exactly. Yeah.
I think that people do, I've ranted on this before, but like any kind of like travel Chicago thing, people ask like, what's a place with great food, fine dining, but no dress code? And it's always like, my hubby hates wearing a dress shirt.
Yeah.
And he loves wearing that. And
honestly,
we bring so much more of our self into the world. We're just like, oh, I'm not a suit guy. The world should cater around me.
Chicago is...
There's no dress code.
There's restaurants that have like a dress code at least. They have a sign on the wall. I'd never seen that in LA. Not once.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I always say that Chicago
in Vegas,
formally has. Why don't we go to those places instead of places?
We do go to those places.
I don't know. We get we go to Dublin's and we get castigated by people for wearing suits.
Gibson's is like one of those places.
No, that's true.
Has a little
more
dress
upstairs.
Code. Yeah.
But,
Oh, and I have one more point I'd like to bring up. So, you mentioned the phrase "crisis of masculinity," and I just want to say I think that it's actually more so a crisis in adulthood. Okay, it's not necessarily that masculinity is being attacked. I think we live in a society where fewer and fewer people want the responsibilities that come with being a man or woman, a husband or wife, or a father or mother anymore. It's like they want to be like permanent Disney adults and just have delayed childhoods. And I think that's why like it's worth talking about masculinity. It's because like people now are wanting to be more manly and be viewed as a man. Like it means more,
I don't know why I'm thinking of this, but do you ever see the thing that's like boys have swag, men have class? That was like a 2012 kind of meme. But I think that like I've always believed that whatever like phase of life you're in, you should like fully inhibit it and enjoy it. Like I didn't dress up as much in college. I was like, who's going to believe this? Like I'm a college student, you know? But then working and being in a more professional environment, I started to dress up more and then bled into my personal
well, you
life.
have to feel like it fits in with your life. I mean, I probably dress more over the top now. I do this full time because it just fits in with my idea about myself. It's like I'm not fooling anybody. This is just what I do.
Yeah, but it's like on the adulthood thing. Like my fear is I don't want to like hold on to that college thing. I don't want to keep on dressing like a younger person or anything. Like I think that each age like provides a new thing for you as well. Like I don't know. I always think that like I wouldn't do like a sweater vest. Is one thing underneath a suit coat, But I feel like once I'm in my 40s and 50s, I'm like, now I'm allowed. Okay. It's like you can like. That's not the only thing to look forward to in your 40s and 50s, of course.
But there are benefits, actually, probably especially for men.
Yeah,
of like different eras. I still think for women, it seems to just like get worse and worse and worse the older you get. Whereas for men, I mean, if anything, it's the opposite, to a certain point. So there are things
such as our curse, but
there are things to think about, of like 40s, 50s, 60s. Yeah. It's a different idea about the kind of person you'll be then. Yeah. There's something to look forward to about all of those.
So I think people like hold on to childhood and fear like conventional adult roles, whatever they might be, like out of a fear of death. Like people say that America fetishizes youth, and then the counter side of that is that we overfixate on death, actually, or we're trying to avoid thinking about it.
Because I think like something we go back to in Silent Generation pretty often is that like a lot of the cultural consequences of urban renewal and all of the car-centric changes in the mid 20th century, they resulted in children not trying to model behavior off of adults or not being able to. And then it's just we've become a society of people who've become a bit stunted developmentally, I think.
This like, age segregation I talked about earlier, like I do think it is. I know this is not something that you're super your world, the whole like urbanist thing.
I see it and I think about it. I remember as a kid really wanting to be an adult. Like I really look forward to that. I think I pretty quickly embrace that. But I see it more in the United States than in the UK or Europe as well, where there's this big difference between a place where children go and a place where adults go. So like you even have restaurants basically that are made for kids, like a Cheesecake Factory or Red Lobster. Like that's made as like
those are family restaurants.
No, that's what I'm saying. Like,
versus like just family. Adults. Yeah.
Whereas in the UK we have more of a pub culture, which is everybody.
Does the whole family go in Weatherspoons?
Well, I didn't go to Weatherspoons.
But I think there's something about like the American kind of suburbanization is also a like a bifurcation of adults and kids as well. It's like we've built the suburbs as this perfect place to raise families, and then that means cities are for young people and all that.
There's also a more of a capitalist incentive of making things specifically for children, which I think in Europe they just didn't get to do it.
There's like just
Thank
deal,
God.
like just take the kids.
No, and I think that's like when I think about parenting, when I eventually have children, I would be more along those lines of, we're going to do things and the children will be there. It doesn't always have to be like Barney the fucking dinosaur and balloons every time the kids leave the house.
No,
you exist in an adult world.
Yeah, and a good example of it being capitalist is actually the teenager was created as a consumer category.
Right.
It came out of capitalism.
But it's like we try and sell so much to kids, but kids are happy with so little, I'd say, in a lot of ways. Like, I remember seeing this meme before I went to Copenhagen that was just like, it feels like Copenhagen is designed by children for children. They have a theme park in the center of like downtown. Everyone rides their bicycles everywhere. There's play gyms everywhere.
Right.
Like the food is like sprinkles on stuff. And I did see a strange amount of candy stores when I was there too. But it's like also a great place to like smoke cigarettes in bars and like get drunk, like do adult things too. And so I think in America we set ourselves up in a false dichotomy between like, oh, if you want kids, you go to the suburbs and you go to Red Lobster every night, and then like if you're a young single, then you live down in the city. Like
I plan to have my kids in a very rural environment, away from
well, yeah, that's always like the dream though, is that you have the city home and the country house kind of thing. That's why I
sell the city home.
Oh, really? I'm so surprised by this. I feel like you're such a, maybe this is just the phase in life you're in right now.
I think
but
that's
feel
how
like
it is, phase of life.
I don't know. I think that you have such a like a city like
lifestyle
and like type of masculinity you sell. Like you don't own a car.
No, that's true. But I can see myself changing in the future. You might be watching Gent Z in 10 years and I'll be like getting out of my truck.
With, fascinating. Like, you in just like
in a flannel,
cowboy jacket or something.
In a flannel and jeans,
Sorry, the market changed. I had to make some adjustments.
It could happen, But that's also a beauty of making content is you can evolve with your audience because let's say now my average viewer is 22. Well, in 10 years, maybe they'll be 32. Ideally, I would like it to. I would like it to obviously keep growing, but I would like it to not become irrelevant to the original audience because they grew up.
It would be pretty strange to still keep selling to the 20s set that you're selling.
Early
20s set. What is?
I don't feel
data
like I'm
wise
even selling. It's just I make it and it happens to appeal to them. Obviously the name Gent Z, it's meant to be Gen Z, but it's
I actually kind of forgot about
it's a broad church.
All right. Well, James, thanks for coming on the show.
It's been really fun.
Absolute pleasure.
It was nice to meet you. It was my first time, but you and Joseph have hung out many times.
Yeah, well, this is only my second podcast I've ever done, but Joe Rogan went pretty well last week. So.
Of course. But and we'll point our listeners in the direction of the Gent Z podcast, Redux, as you guys you come back
coming
to
back
life.
for sure.
All right.
Yeah. Well, have a good one. Bye,
Thanks for
everyone.
listening.
All right, thank you.
Bye.